Hi, this is what I'm showing you here. This is Steve again. I'm showing you some artichokes. They're perennial. I like perennial vegetables. They're really nice to have. You don't have to replant them all the time. I have a couple other things I was going to show you. Perennial onions that I got. They're over here. I planted them in a couple of different places, but this is one of them over here. One of them's called Egyptian walking onions. They have little onion sets on the top, and that's what you replant, and they grow year after year. And then another thing I have is what you call, over right in here I planted some what you call multiplier onions. In the fall you dig them up and they multiply like garlic, and you dry them, and then you replant them in the fall again, and they're a little yellow onion, and they're really good flavored and mild. So it's kind of a good thing to have for self-sustainable gardening. And this other part here I was talking about earlier was I'm going to plant strawberries out here. I put in a foot of compost in this whole area here and let it kind of rot. Well, there's some little bit of cover crop, and there's a bunch of Russian kale regrowing from seed that just spread. Last winter I had Russian kale over in this part of the garden, and in May it started blooming, and the bees just love it. It bloomed for 2 months. The bees were just working it, the bumblebees, the honeybees. I mean, I didn't realize how good of a bee plant it is, but it was excellent. So I replanted it over here along the fence line. I'm just going to let it seed because it kind of got in the way of everything else in the garden. So I planted some onions for seed out here and different things, and I'll see how that goes. Eventually I'm going to have grapes along that fence line, and maybe some kiwi, because I guess the male kiwis can be 50 foot apart and still pollinate. So you have to have females and males. And then out here in this part of the garden, I didn't really talk to you about it, but I want to make some raised beds, double dig, where you dig down a layer, take the soil away, and use a spade and loosen the soil down below. Well, I'm going to do some experimenting this real early spring. I'm going to put fresh manure down underneath, and then put a foot of it, and then put some compost on top of it, like 6 inches, and the heat from that will make my early vegetables like peas and onions and fabia beans grow better, because the roots, warm roots, really make things grow. The soil temperature has more to do with it than the air temperature. You know, air temperature does have something to do with it, but you get that soil warm, you can really grow some things. That's the whole key, as long as we don't get a real wet spring. Our weather has not been cooperating lately, but you just got to live with it. But I was going to talk to you about, remember I said I had 1,500 pounds of potatoes. Well, potatoes are a carbohydrate, and you need that to survive. So your garden should be 60% carbon, which is your cover crops, your wheat, your clovers, your buckwheat, different things. You should have 30% calorie in your crops, calorie type crops like carbohydrates like potatoes, parsnips, and rutabagas. If you're in the south, you're going to need other things like sweet potatoes and such, you know, wherever you grow. Here we can't grow sweet potatoes, it's not warm enough here. But and then you need 10% of your garden spot should be for leaf greens. And I'm a firm believer in lots of greens. You stay healthy eating greens, and I love them raw. That's what I do. I like kale, I like parsley, I like broccoli is just excellent. And you can, you know, you don't just need to eat the broccoli itself, you can eat the leaves. As long as you leave enough leaves to form to grow again. The leaves have just as much nutrition as the broccoli. So I have some winter type broccolis that are growing that are the purple. I think it's called, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's really a good green. I use it, and I also have perpetual spinach, and I got Swiss chard. It grows really well here, and the perpetual spinach hasn't went to seed much. It just keeps growing. So this winter, if it starts getting cold, I'm going to put some straw over to keep it from freezing hard. See if I can save it. Now I have the greens in the greenhouse too. I grow lots of greens in the greenhouse. The big thing with fall gardening is people don't realize you don't plant in the fall. You plant in the late summer, in August and September, first part of September. You got to get those plants already mature before winter comes in. They can't grow during the winter. We don't get enough sunlight here in the wintertime. So that's how things are here. And but you can get things going in the greenhouse, but even then there's not enough light. But I noticed the broccolis do okay in the wintertime in the greenhouse, because they don't need the light quality as like leaf lettuce. A lot of times I get mold in there in the wintertime. I don't heat my greenhouse, but I would like to have a greenhouse that was in the ground if I had a hilly situation. I had a slope to the south type situation. I'd have an ideal place. I'd have a greenhouse in the side of the hill where I'm using the earth to keep it warm. But I'm kind of pretty flat, and we get lots of rain here sometimes. We can get 6 or 7 inches of rain at a time, and I probably get flooded out. There's no way of keeping it above ground, so I got to live with what I got here. I was going to show you a fruit tree over here. I did a bunch of grafting, but one thing I do believe in fruit trees is to mulch them. I'm going to make these mulch pads as the trees get bigger, because the roots are on the top on fruit trees. You got to be real careful and make sure the grass is using up all the nutrients. So you got to really put a lot of nutrients on the ground. I like composting all my trees, but here I grafted this tree here. It's a pear. The pear wasn't worth anything, so I grafted this limb on right here on this thing, and it really grew. I had to hold it because I was afraid the wind was going to break it. In fact, the other one I had growing, it was just fine too. It grafted, but the wind broke it. And I tried putting it back on, but I was gone for a few days, and it killed it. So I ended up with this variety called Orchis. It's a real good variety for around here. It came from Orcas Island, I think. And it's a pear. And then I have a bunch of other trees, but all my trees are mulched. And grafting is real easy to do. You just got to do it the right time of the year. You can kind of see my mulch on my trees. And my apple trees, I 5 gallons of apples, bucket of apples, makes 2 gallons of dried fruit. And I made a lot of dried fruit. And I love dried apples. I use my Excalibur, and I got another older variety of dryer that I use to you can see the mulch. The deer have knocked that one down pretty good too, but the leaves are blowing off from it's late year. But there's a few apples. I had a lot more apples than most people did. I don't know why, but I got a pretty good crop. My pear trees were just loaded. My plums were good, but my cherry trees, I didn't have anything on them. Some of that's pollination problems. I cut all my other trees down. I got young cherry trees now, so they haven't started blooming yet. But anyway, that's a start right there of what's going on. But I'll see you later. Bye.